Okay, wow, all the numbers, everyone's joining us this evening. So as you come in, welcome. I think when you enter, you'll be on mute. So if you can just kind of leave yourself on mute for now, there's going to be loads of opportunities for you to talk throughout the evening. Just so that you know as well, the presentation part of tonight will be recorded. So if you don't catch everything, don't worry. It will go up on YouTube and you'll be sent a link and you can share it with all your friends, which is amazing. But yeah, welcome to this evening's launch event for the Sharing Jesus resource. We are so excited to have you, and we've got 100 people, which is incredible. Now, earlier on today, we started the Fresh Expressions online gathering, and we had a couple, or at least one person from Australia, and they were taking the challenge to come tonight. So if that's you and you're still up and you're in Australia, I really want you to say hello, because you get a special halo in heaven, and we will celebrate you and your commitment to sharing Jesus even when it's the middle of the night. But we've got the chat is open, so do use the chat. It's always brilliant to hear where people are zooming in from. Fresh Expressions is not just something in the UK, and pretty much because I think we've been able to do stuff online, every event we've had people from all over the world. So do say hi. Gaul, awesome. I've got a friend in Gaul. Thank you, Lydia. So do say hello. Also, you might see someone who's from somewhere near you and you might want to connect, and that is another fantastic aspect of the Fresh Expressions gatherings. So welcome tonight. My name is Lizzie. I work for Fresh Expressions as the kind of communications person, and also I am a lay pioneer. I live in Liverpool, and with my husband Dave, we run Story House. Story House is an independent coffee shop, a charity, and a fresh expression of church. And I'm going to really briefly introduce you to the other people that are kind of involved in this evening, so you know who they are. So I've got Tim. Tell us who you are.
Hi, great to see you all. My name's Tim. I work for Fresh Expressions 3 days a week doing network and facilitating. I'm really excited to be a part of this evening's. Thanks, Lizzie.
Amazing. Simon, your turn.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name's Simon. I'm a contractor for resourcing with Fresh Expressions. I'm a Baptist and I live in North Cambridgeshire.
Amazing, thank you. Susie. Susie's the brains of the operation.
Hi, I'm Susie and I help Fresh Expressions with events. So if you have any issues, you can just find me on chat and send me a little message and I'll be able to help this evening.
Amazing, thank you, Susie. And then finally, our special guest tonight, Mike Moynier. Can you just introduce yourself to the people that are here this evening, Mike?
So hi everyone, thank you all very much for coming. I'm a consultant, I suppose, to Fresh Expressions, among other things, and I'm the one to blame for this Sharing Jesus resource.
Oh no, Mike, I'm so excited about this resource. I've been telling so many people about it. It's, I think, such a gift to the church. So welcome if you're just joining us. It may be for some of you, this is your first Fresh Expression event. For some of you might have been to a lot of Fresh Expressions events before. Some of you may have been at the gathering this afternoon as well. But wherever it was, however you found out about us, however much you know about us, or maybe you know nothing at all, we just want you to know that you are so welcome here and no question is silly. We just want to help equip you to tell people about Jesus and to celebrate the good news that we have to share. So just to tell you a little bit about Fresh Expressions, we are a growing movement of everyday people across all denominations who are starting new Christian communities in the nooks and crannies of people's everyday lives. From new housing to rural, urban, suburban, messy church, third age to forests, coffee shops, beaches, pubs, barns, online, and even in church buildings. Fresh Expressions has been going for over 30 years, and we've got over 30 years of experience of pioneering in creative and contextual ways, accompanied by robust theological research, reflections, and reports on how Fresh Expressions have gathered and discipled people who weren't connecting with traditional forms of church. So we know all about the challenges and the joys of pioneering, but more importantly, we know that this approach to mission works. We have so many stories about it that we would love to share with you. Fresh Expressions is not a denomination. We're not a pathway to ordination. Instead, we're a grassroots movement filled with people who just can't stop thinking about who isn't in church, and we want to do something about it. We're a band of misfits, so if you feel like you don't fit in, don't worry, you're in good company. Visionaries, prophets, evangelists, creative entrepreneurs who can see what isn't there and have the grit and the faith to go out, to listen, to love, to serve, and to tell people about Jesus and work with their new communities to create a new and authentic expression of church that makes sense to them. So welcome. It may be that you are seen as a bit crazy in your community, that you might have a million ideas before breakfast of what is possible, of how God could use you, or maybe there's something that you'd love to do to bring more of God's kingdom into your community. Perhaps it could be, though, that you come tonight and you're burnt out or exhausted by the call to go and make disciples, and you're looking for some inspiration. So the invitation we have for you today is just come as you are and receive, and we pray that you will be inspired by kind of what's shared this evening to find new ways of how to share Jesus in your context. So basically, yeah, tonight is a celebration of this resource that has been released, and it was also the result of kind of donations from some different organisations as well, who will be mentioned later on. And Fresh Expressions, over the past 21 years, we've benefited from the support and generous investment from denominations and leaders in the UK who've partnered with pioneers to start several thousand Fresh Expressions of church. Since 2019, these same denominational advocates have supported Fresh Expressions as we transition from an organisation to a movement, and from an appointed leader to a community of movement leaders, which is the place that we're in now. We have a leadership community of people who have led Fresh Expressions for many years. And as a result, the way we're funded has changed, and we're gradually moving towards becoming self-sustaining. And so for those of you who signed up for tonight, I know some of you gave financially as a gift towards the work of Fresh Expressions, and we are so grateful for what you've given. We want to offer everything for free, and that's why tonight's event is free. That's why sharing Jesus is free for anyone to use, because we want to equip people. But we also need people like you who give generously. So this is free. We're not kind of demanding any money, but like later on, there will be a link if you want to find out more about the movement and maybe think about kind of giving towards us, kind of growing the resources that we offer, like tonight's Sharing Jesus resource. So without a doubt, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Simon, who has kind of he was the kind of brains behind the resource with Mike. They've created it, but I think first we've got a video, actually. Is that right? Yeah, I didn't look at the order, I didn't bring it up. So we're going to watch a video from Rachel Jordan Wolf, and she is part of Hope, and they have kind of given towards the development of this resource. So this is a little teaser of what we're going to be looking at tonight.
I'm here to talk to you about Sharing Jesus, the latest resource from Fresh Expressions. If you want to introduce a group of people to Jesus, but it seems just like too big a leap, then this is like helpful tools on how to do the little steps, how to introduce them in small ways so that they can go on a journey with you towards Jesus. Not one big leap, but lots of little steps that will help them towards that end goal. Just things like key questions that you could do around the Bible, or stepping further back, discussion questions around key topics, how to take that into something deeper, the question to ask that might help spin that round. Little top tips that could help you to help your group go on a journey towards Jesus.
So there it is, the Sharing Jesus resource introduced by Rachel Jordan-Wolf there, and there's the logo, and there's the website address, sharingjesus.life. Now, I'm going to introduce Mike in a moment, but I'm just going to ask you this evening, it may be very tempting to go and open your browser and type in sharingjesus.life as you're watching this. Zoom and websites don't always work well together, particularly if there are videos involved. So I'm playing videos from my computer and showing you the website from screenshots tonight, because it doesn't work very well when you're on Zoom. So I would encourage you not to go on the website this evening while we're online, because you may have similar difficulties playing and looking at the website, but to save that until afterwards and enjoy the website as much as you like afterwards. That said, Mike, really good to be with you this evening. Thanks so much for sharing this evening with us and for sharing this resource as well. It'd be good to introduce you a bit more to people. There will be some people who are gathered this evening who will have got Mike Moynier books on their bookshelf, some of the fat ones that are really theologically rich, and others which are a bit slimmer. And one of the things I love about you, Mike, is your ability to take some really deep things and make them very easy to understand, not simplistic, but simple to understand. And I like particularly the books that you create with pictures in as well, illustrations that demonstrate things simply for people like me. But Mike, perhaps you can just tell us, as I say, a bit more about yourself and in some ways where this resource comes from and what experience you have in terms of Fresh Expressions that has given you the insights that you're sharing in this resource.
So thanks, Simon. For the last 20 years or so, I've been working with pioneers, folks who are starting Fresh Expressions, new Christian communities, missional communities, whatever you want to call them. I've been working with them, watching what they do, listening to them, asking questions, sometimes writing about it and so on. And this resource comes out of what I've heard people doing. So I've been making mental notes of what I think are brilliant ideas. And sometimes what I've done is to actually pull two ideas together and make it, say, the basis of one of the topics. What would happen is I'd listen to someone, I'd say, gosh, that makes sense. And then I'd hear someone else say something and I'd say, oh, I could add that to what that first person said. That would then give me a sort of concept or an idea. And then I'd go and try it out on people. You know, so sometimes I'd try it out on audiences and see whether they responded positively. Other times I'd say to people, do you think this would work in your context? Sometimes I got people to actually go and try it. And they came back and said, yeah, this is working. So, so that's how the resource came. Before getting involved with Fresh Expressions, I'm a Church of England minister, and I led a parish down in the southwest. And one of the things I did was right early in the 90s, even before Alpha was invented, I used to run just looking courses every term for a new group of people who are exploring the Christian faith. And then at the end of that course would run for about 10 weeks. And then they'd become a little house group and they would go on. And it's really just like Alpha discovered subsequently. I used to find, you know, I'd start with 18 people, about 9 people would stay the course at the end, would join the home group and would in some way make some sort of Christian commitment in that way. And I must say, looking back, I would love to have had the knowledge that I've now had listening to all these pioneers and being able to do some of the things that I've suggested in this resource.
Brilliant, Mike, thank you. And I guess in terms of this particular resource, this Sharing Jesus resource, and for those of you that joined us this evening, this evening's session comes in the middle of a longer community gathering for the Fresh Expressions community, where we're looking at the E word, evangelism. So this particular resource, which you might call an evangelism resource or a resource that helps people share Jesus, why this particular resource and why now?
I think I could answer that, Simon, by saying I think that there are 3 distinctive features about this resource. I don't say the word unique, but at least distinctive. And the first is that the focus is on doing evangelism in a community with a group. The focus is not on one-to-one evangelism. Now, one-to-one evangelism is great. It's a fantastic thing to do, but there are lots of resources out there about how you can share your faith on a one-to-one basis. This is about working with groups of people to explore the Christian faith. So that's the first distinguishing feature. It's about communal evangelism rather than individualistic evangelism. The second feature, I think, is that it works with people's reluctance to share their faith. It doesn't try to overcome that reluctance. It doesn't say, look, this is a way that you can become brave about sharing your faith. This is the way you can be really confident in sharing your faith. It doesn't do that. It says, actually, let's recognize that many of us are very British about this. We're quite embarrassed about sharing our faith. That's where the sort of people we are. Okay, given that, what do you do? And how do you do that within the limitations of your shyness and your reticence? So it works with people's reluctance to share their faith rather than against it. And then thirdly, it's a form of evangelism that builds faith communities in life rather than inviting people to an existing congregation. So what I was doing down in Taunton was I was running these little just looking exploratory groups. And then I was saying to people, why don't you come to church as well as being a little home group? And what I discovered was that for those people who were already semi-detached to church, some made the transition to Sunday worship. But for the significant number of people who had virtually no contact with church, virtually none of them made the transition to Sunday worship. In fact, by the end of my time in Taunton, I was saying to myself, why am I even trying to get them into church? Why did I just go and rent a room in a pub and we'll do worship, you know, as a new separate congregation? And the reason I didn't do that was because it was the early 90s and my thinking was still, we have to do this on Sunday. And I already had 3 Sunday morning congregations and 2 evening ones. And I thought to myself, the church will never allow me to have a 4th and not be at some of these other congregations. So, you know, I got stuck, and I got stuck because of an old-fashioned way of thinking. So, so that's basically what this resource is about. These 3 features. It's a resource that's really just designed, I hope, for most of you guys and folks who are, you know, on this webinar. You know, if you're a pioneer, if you're leading a new Christian community or a fresh expression or something that seeks to become a missional community, then I hope that this is a resource for you, helping you to see what you could do in that context.
Brilliant, Mike. I'm going to share a slide now, which is taken from another resource that Fresh Expressions have produced and that you're involved in, Mike, the Godsend resource, which is available in app form on our website, fxresourcing.org, on the resourcing, Fresh Expressions website, fxresourcing.org, and also in book format. But this is something that's used there. So there may be people, if people are involved in Fresh Expressions, they may well have seen this in some format before. But it might be helpful just for those people that have joined us this evening who say, you know, I'm not quite sure yet in my mind what a fresh expression is. Are you able to perhaps talk us through this diagram briefly, and also to perhaps locate this resource in the midst of this diagram, Mike?
So this diagram, Simon, it's what we call the sort of loving first journey. Sometimes it's been called the Fresh Expressions journey. Sometimes people call it a missional journey. But basically, it's what we've seen time and again, initiatives doing. People do this spontaneously, and they've done it so often when they're starting a fresh expression or a new Christian community. They've done it so often that we've actually sort of, as it were, drawn it and mapped it out in the way you can see. And so what typically happens is that a small team of people, of Christians, they get together, they listen to their context, they listen to God, they listen to the people they're called to serve. They find a practical way to love and serve those people. I call this organized love. Perhaps they do a luncheon club, or they run a cafe, or they start a bereavement group, or whatever. They find a practical way to love the people around them. As people gather around that activity of love, community forms. Folks keep coming back and they get to know each other and they enjoy being in each other's presence. And then in that context, the team begins to share Jesus. And as people begin to discover Jesus and be discovered by Jesus, they begin to form a Christian worshiping community that's connected to the wider church. And this has the sort of characteristics of church. And then at their best, the folks who are coming to faith will go and repeat the process. They'll do it in their own way, in their own context. They'll start by listening, finding a practical way to love people, building community with them, sharing Jesus, encouraging something with the character of church to emerge, and then to repeat the process again. And this resource really, you know, if you look at this cycle, there are three big hurdles. There's the first hurdle of starting, but quite a few people are really good at that. And we've found, you know, hundreds and thousands of pioneers over the past 15, 20 years who've actually started and done the first three circles on that journey. But the second big hurdle is sharing Jesus. And that's where so often many of our potential fresh expressions get stuck. They can't find a way that they can actually share Jesus and move on to the second half of that cycle. And so this resource is really to help them jump that hurdle.
Brilliant. And we'll move on in a second just to look at the content or have an overview of the content of this new resource. And it's probably just worth underlining that Mike talked about listening to God, and that the white line, although it indicates the direction of travel, that direction of travel isn't always linear, backwards and forwards, but also that line begins with prayer, and that white line indicates that prayer is existent all the way through this journey. There's a foundation, and particularly in this part of the journey of sharing Jesus, prayer is essential in that. So let's have a look at the oh, there we go. This is where the Sharing Jesus resource is found. So this is a picture of the website and the various units. Mike, do you want to just give an overview? We can see the titles of the 7 topics there. Do you want to just go through those, and I'll scroll down the screen in a moment.
Yeah, and just to emphasize the point that you were making, Simon, that little loving first cycle that I described and you showed, it is very, very messy in real life. It's not sequential in real life, and very often the circles overlap and they pile on top of each other, and as you say, teams focus shifts back and then forward again and so on. So you know, in all this, you know, if you think my life's much more messy, my community is much more messy than that, then join the club, because everyone's communities are much more messy than that diagram. If we turn to this resource here, then, I mean, there's a little introductory page and that video you saw at the beginning, which sets out what the resource is about. And then there's the first topic, which is called starting. And that's basically about building on what you've got. Just start with what you've got. If you've got a luncheon club, if you've got some sort of activity, a group that goes skating together or whatever, a film group, a book group, whatever it is, this is what you can do having got that group. So you can put something alongside it. So that's the first topic. The second topic is what I call conversations with a difference. It's about how you can have discussions in your group. If you've got a walking group, for example, and you stop and you go to a pub and you eat lunch together or something, or have a drink together, and you sit around a table, how can you have a discussion that everyone enjoys, but also just touches base with God? So no, that's not an easy thing to do. We don't normally do that. We don't have a discussion about sport, or we don't have a discussion about politics, or we don't have a discussion about what films we're watching and what TV programs and Netflix programs we're enjoying. We don't normally have those discussions and then make some connection to God with them. And if I say that to you, you'll say, "Oh my goodness me, you couldn't do it." Well, we've got some ideas in that second topic that might help you think afresh about that. And then the third topic is about simple ways of doing exploratory Bible study. It's the discovering topic. And I want to suggest that the approaches we describe in discovering, they are so simple that anyone can use them. Couldn't be simpler. In fact, they're so simple that even Tim Lee can use them because he's one of the stars on the video. But I often say they are so simple that even an atheist could lead these types of Bible discussion and may be used by God for someone to come to faith. So if you don't believe me, just go and have a look and see what's being described there. The fourth topic is about difficult questions. You know, some people say the last thing I want to do is to run an exploratory Bible study because they might ask me a question and I don't know the answer to it. Well, we've got a very simple response to that. You don't have to give an answer. And if you're saying to yourself, oh, give us a break, how can that work? Then go and look at that resource, because this is a piece of advice that I picked up from someone and it worked for them. Then the fifth topic, which is actually one of my favorites, is handling disagreement. How can we have disagreements in our groups about the Christian faith and still remain friends? And the question, I suppose, really is how can we explore the Christian faith, but at the same time create a safe space for anyone to disagree if they want to. And I picked this some of the suggestions here in this topic up. I picked it up from other people, and it's my favorite topic actually, because I think in our life in the church today, sometimes, certainly in our life in society, we are not very good at respecting one another who disagree. And we are actually quite unkind to one another. And so what I wanted to suggest in that fifth topic is how can we be kind to one another and yet also disagree with integrity? And then the sixth topic is about going deeper in exploring Jesus. And then the last topic is about introducing people to Christian worship. I just want to emphasize that, we had to put the topics in a list. You know, you can't put them all on top of each other. So there has to be a sequence, but you don't have to follow that sequence. You can just take any topic in any order. You can just go in and take one topic and look at it. You can take two or three in a random way. Just dip in and out in whatever way you want, but it's not a sequential series. It's something that you can just pluck from as and when you need it.
Brilliant, Mike. And I just want to point out, looking at that screen now, a couple of other things on the website. We'll talk a bit later about some workshops that we'll be offering. And if you want to know about those, and particularly if you join our mailing list from this website, it will flag up that you're interested in the Sharing Jesus resource, and we'll invite you to those workshops. But also at the bottom, additional insights, the eWord gathering that we've been part of, some of us have been part of for the last half the day. We had Kate Williams speak there, but Kate Williams has produced a paper, and Will Donaldson both produced additional insights about evangelism and sharing Jesus, which you can access on the website as well. So let's move into the first of those units, because we're going to show a few animations. If anyone's seen the Godsend resource, FX Godsend, if you look that up in the App Store or Google Play, you'll find some animations there. Creative Stream, based in Sheffield, is our animator, and we kept the same animator from the Godsend resource. Should I just go ahead and play this, Michael? Do you want to say anything about it before?
No, why don't you just play them through, Simon? I think it'd be great.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe you're involved in an outreach project with people who don't go to church, a bereavement support group, for example, or a group that meets for lunch. It's dead easy to add a spiritual dimension and introduce them to a fuller life. All are made to feel welcome whether they choose to take part in this or not, so here's an example of what you can do. Invite those who wish to stay on after the meeting. Gather round 1 or 2 tables. Light some candles. Play some Christian music. Read a story from the Bible or an extract from a collection of Christian spiritual writings. Allow time for silent prayer or reflection. Read a couple of prayers or make up your own. Just 15 minutes max. You could do something like this with almost any outreach initiative. A craft group, a lunch for people who are homeless, a youth group, a community cafe, and more. So why not enhance what you already offer? Why not give people a chance to explore a richer life? No one is compelled to join in, but for those who do, they'll be nourished in their spiritual growth.
So that's the starting animation. I'll move straight on to the second one, Mike, which is discussing, here we go.
Want to share the Christian faith, but talking about Jesus would be a step too far? Try Conversations with a Difference. Choose a topic that interests the group, a news item, a celebrity, well-being, a soap opera, your pets, sport, a music genre, anything the group would like to discuss. Talk about it for a while. Then ask the question that turns it into a different kind of conversation. If God exists, what would God think? Or if you prefer, imagine a great spiritual teacher dropped in. What would they say? Imagine a walking group. When you stop for a drink or a meal, start a conversation with a difference. Invite someone to suggest a topic. After a while, ask the question that makes the conversation different. If God exists, or if a great spiritual teacher dropped in, what would they say? You could do this with young people, at your messy church activity table, with your neighbours, with any group. Want this to feel natural? See the written resource for ideas. People would become more confident in talking about spirituality. They would connect spirituality to life, and they would have fun.
And a written resource was mentioned there, and we're going to tell you about that after the next animation, the Discovering animation. We just thought we'd show you the first 3 animations. We're not going to show you all 7, but here's the third one.
Looking for an easy way to share the Christian faith? Invite people to a spirituality group. You might explain, Jesus is known as one of the world's greatest spiritual teachers. Let's look at some of the stories about him and see what we think. For each story, use Bible talk. Ask 4 questions. If this story happened today, what would it look like? What is it saying to me? Could it make a difference to my life? If so, how? Did it make a difference? If so, how? You could look at the first 3 questions in one session, or you could do them over 3 sessions to keep each session short. Then do an experiment. See if the story does make a difference to people's lives. The key word is experiment. Some experiments bear fruit, others don't. That's life. So don't let people worry about whether the experiment works or not. In the next session, share your experiences. Christians involved can relax, because the Bible does the evangelism. All they have to do is join in. No embarrassment, just authentic conversation. Anyone can take part.
So on the screen there, you can see the Discovering unit, and at the bottom, underneath each of those animations, there's a link to download the PDF guide for Discovering, and we're just going to show you that one. I don't know if, Mike, if you want to say anything about the yeah, just there. You click on that, and we've got these PDFs attached to each of the topics.
So each topic has this written guide which amplifies the topic a little bit. This is probably one of the longest guides, really. It starts out by just recapping the 4 questions that were described and the approach that were described in the animation. So you've heard it and seen it, but you can read it again. It then has a little section, how would I invite people to one of these Bible talk sessions? So it gives it an idea or a couple of ideas for that. It then it suggests some alternative approaches, because one of the things that we're very keen on is that people shouldn't feel trapped into one approach. So there are a number of different approaches that we describe here. I think there are 4 or 5 altogether, and of course you can mix them all up if you want. And you can vary it. If people are getting a bit bored with one approach, you can adopt another. And then we've got a section which responds to an objection that people might have, which is, this is all far too experiential, it's all too subjective. So we deal with that. And then at the end, we've just listed some of the advantages, we think, of approaching discovering Jesus in this sort of a way. Now that's, every guide is a bit different, but that's a sort of flavor that you'll get in the written guides, some longer, and this is one of the longer ones, but some quite short.
Great, Mike. And so each unit has what those, and also each unit has underneath the animation a story, and we're just going to play a couple of the stories here, which is Mike, again, do you want to just briefly explain the story?
Yeah, in the early days when I was talking with people about possibly producing this resource, the feedback was, well, you've got to have real life stories, people who've actually done it. And that obviously makes sense. So in each of the topics, there is one video story, someone just talking to their phone camera, and we've just uploaded, or Simon uploaded it, and he's going to play 2 of them now.
Yeah, so this is Lorna from the second unit discussing.
Hi, my name's Laura, and I was involved with Conversations with a Difference involving prayer. When I was a youth worker, we had a group of young people aged about 11 to 16 who would come along to our group. Quite a diverse bunch, none of them had been to church before, and we realised that these young people just craved somebody to listen to them. And so we scheduled into our time together the sharing of food, and then afterwards we'd sit in a circle and we'd share the highs and lows of our week. But we realised very quickly that none of us were very good at listening, so we introduced a sharing spoon, and so only the person holding the sharing spoon could talk and everybody else had to listen. And then we thought that this is an amazing opportunity to pray for some of those things that were shared. And so a couple of weeks later, we asked the young people if they would mind for the leaders to pray for them, and they were really keen and worked really well. So a couple of more weeks passed, and we asked the young people themselves if they would like to pray for each other, and eager to talk, they said yes. And so one person would share with the spoon, it would get passed on to somebody else who would then pray for them in however they felt most comfortable in their hearts or out loud. And it just became a really sacred time of being heard, of learning how to pray, of learning how to listen, and prevented these conversations from becoming like an advice centre or purely cerebral, and open the space for God to work there and then. And sometimes God worked in miraculous ways, surprising all of us as we journeyed together. And he always blew me away when the young people came back the following week and said how God had been present with them. And what also was amazing, that nobody ever turned it down. And I think if I was amongst a group of adults who similarly didn't really have a church background, I'd happily experiment with something similar, having that listening space and naturally introducing prayer into it, although perhaps not with the sharing spoon, unless that's really their ticket.
And just one final video for you, which is the story from, have I not got, so this is the, from the enriching unit, which is, I think, Grace talks a bit more about how sharing Jesus led to something new emerging. But we're just going to play this story.
After making lots of contacts, we decided to plant church at 5, meet on Saturdays at 5 o'clock in the local community centre. Why? We simply didn't feel that a course was going to work for the people that we'd met and wouldn't be a good fit for our context. So what did we do when we gathered at church at 5? We kept it short and sweet, within 45 minutes maximum. We would have a welcome song using the Big Family of God. It's a great action song. We'd then have a moment of thanksgiving called Wow God, when people would be invited to say things they're thankful for, and then we all say together, Wow God. That section was led by a child. We'd then move into a moment of lament, which was led by another member of the team, where we're just acknowledging before God that which is hurting us or our community or the world. And we would make that physical as well, to have a relevant image on the screen, and then everyone had a stone and they'll place that into a bowl of water, just a kind of way to ritualize and embody our lament. We'd then break for snacks, which would be healthy snacks as well as those nice sweet treats, and just again have some chance to have fellowship and get to know one another. We'd then come back to part 2, which would probably be called Service of the Word, where we would someone would read a Bible passage from an accessible translation. We would then show an animation of that passage if possible, and then would pick one question for people to reflect on that passage. And we found that we would stick with one passage for 4 weeks so that we could create depth and people could really go deep into it. Or if it only came that once a month, they weren't going to come back next month and find that we've moved on massively and done 5 or 6 different passages by then. There'll be an opportunity for response, which might be listening to a song. We've done Holy Communion before, once a month, or praying. And we would always do the Lord's Prayer again with actions. We would end with a song, and we'd pick one song for 4 weeks, because it's often a new song, people aren't familiar with Christian songs, and so this was one way again of building up confidence, understanding and familiarity. And then we end by packing up together. That was part of our act of worship. When we talk about that, being part of a church is also, mucking all in together. So we'd all pack up together. And when that was finished, whoever was left, we would have a final prayer. A key component we found of all this was that the members of the team, the core team, were people who were on the spectrum of faith, but they were not our regular Sunday members. There were people from the community who had a candle of faith but felt conventional church wasn't working for them. So by having a core team made of the people you're seeking to reach, you can ensure that if it works for your core team, it's going to work for their friends, it's going to work for their families, it's going to work for the wider community. And I found that has been really refreshing, energizing, challenging, but has been exciting to see people grow in their faith and in their confidence. Thank you.
Great. So sorry that some of you was having difficulty hearing the stories. Hopefully the animations came through. But yeah, some people were obviously having difficulty hearing those. They were a bit quieter. So, but on the website, you will the sound works fine.
And Simon, can I just say, both those happen to be clergy. And that's just by chance. Let me assure you, not all the videos are by clergy. I think almost half are by lay people. And of course, Lorna was actually talking about what she did before she was ordained. So just to make sure that folks don't get the wrong impression here.
Yeah, and just in terms of starting Fresh Expressions and pioneering, Mike, that goes without saying that this is for not just for ministers, for clergy to take the resource and use in their context. This is for everybody. This isn't just for clergy. So let's. I think we're going to move to some breakout groups now, Mike. I think we've probably got about 10 minutes, and we've got these questions Mike and I have talked about previously. Do you want to just quickly go through as Mike before we send people into breakout groups so they can chat through these?
I mean, if these questions are helpful, do talk about them in your breakout groups. If you want to talk about something else, talk about whatever you want to talk about. And we'll look forward to having your comments and your feedback when we come back into the plenary.
Brilliant. I'll quickly read those for you just in case they are helpful. What challenges have you found when sharing Jesus? What ways have you found to be fruitful in sharing Jesus? And any questions you might have about this sharing Jesus resource. So I think Susie is going to do the wonders of technology and send people into groups. I think of about 5 for about 10 minutes, and we'll see you back shortly. Great. Well, welcome back. I think most of us we're just arriving now. That's great. Good to see you. And if you'd like to, in the chat box, I hope you had some really good conversations. Maybe if you want to put something from those conversations, something that struck you, perhaps a comment or a question, or just something that you felt was useful that you heard someone else say in your group, that'd be great. So do type that into the chat box. In the meantime, we've got Andrea Vertigan, who is with us, and there she is. And as Lizzie said, that this resource wouldn't have been possible without donations, and the most significant donor to this resource was the Salvation Army. And Andrea is just tell us what your role is, Andrea, within the Salvation Army.
Yeah, hi. My role is a national role that deals with all things pioneering and fresh expressions, along with my husband, Andrew.
Brilliant, brilliant. And I know this evening you've sort of been thrown into this. There was somebody who was going to be with us this evening who's unfortunately had to respond to a family situation. But so, yeah, Andrea, tell us why the Salvation Army are keen to be involved in this, and yeah, your responses as you've seen the resource.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we were as the Salvation Army, we were thrilled to partner you in this whole process and this whole project and this vision. And there's a real synergy with the Salvation Army and with this particular type of resource that is being created. As you know, Salvation Army is the Salvation Army, keys in the title there, and birthed with a real passion for sharing Jesus. I mean, William and Catherine Booth, absolutely passionate evangelists. And there's a story of Catherine on her way walking to a church service, saw a lady in the street in an absolute terrible state, spoke to her, who invited her into the house and sat and talked to her, and then spoke to her about Jesus. This lady was saved and called her family, and the whole family got saved. She then left the house, but obviously kept in touch, but walked onto this church service. William saying, "Where have you been?" "Oh, I've just been to see this lady, and she's saved and her family saved." Then got up into the pulpit and preached. This is what we're about. It's about reaching people and people getting to know about Jesus and becoming Christians. But we've noticed over the years that in the things that we've been doing to reach people, there's been a bit of a tendency where you're trying to do things to reach people, but there's this nervousness, the hesitancy, and maybe a little bit of fear of mentioning Jesus, because you don't want to put people off. You don't want them to go out and run away and never come back again. So it's almost, doing the soft touch, actually doing that to then bring them in. But this resource, I think, is absolutely amazingly brilliant. Hearing it, seeing it, this is about empowering us. This is about equipping us. This is about enabling us, a resource in our hands that is user-friendly to actually get us, to help us do the Jesus talk, to actually help us share Jesus. So this is an amazing thing that for not just the Salvation Army, but all the church, to actually say, we can do this. We can share Jesus. So, yeah. Thank you.
Brilliant, Andrea. Thank you very much. And it's great. As I said at the beginning, it wouldn't have been possible to do this without Salvation Army. So we really do appreciate that, and we do. You know, it was the generosity there that this is being able to be offered free to people to download and to use. Mike, I'm just looking at some of the comments and questions here, and which is great. Sounds like, you know, as always, these breakout groups never last long enough when you start getting into a good conversation. So some comments here: experimenting rather than building a legacy. There's interesting issue, and this is perhaps a larger sort of fresh expressions question about trying new things and church emerging out of these sort of sharing Jesus conversations that people may fear losing the traditional elements of church. How do we put people's minds at rest? I don't know if you want to tackle that one, Mike, to sort of, as I say, a broader fresh expressions question, the challenge that is there to what exists at the moment.
So, I mean, we all come with our own histories and our own tradition of Christian understanding. Some will be more evangelical, others will be more Catholic, some will have a particular theological emphases and so on. And we wouldn't be true to ourselves if we completely forgot about those as we came and began to share the gospel with other people. But of course, we want to take our tradition and help it to be appropriate in the context in which we're working. And so, I mean, we do that in the church all the time. You know, we want the Christian faith to be appropriate to children. We want them to be appropriate to teenagers and so on. So this isn't a new thought. So as we engage with people outside the church and try and help them, you know, as it were, be handrails for them to walk towards Jesus, as we try and do that, we'll want to make sure that our Christian faith and the way we talk about it is in language and in ways that they understand and actually connects with the questions that they're asking. And that's exactly what Jesus did. You know, he took his Jewish faith and applied it to the people around him, talked in their language, answered the questions that they were asking. So that's really what we're doing. You know, the more you can engage them in people and help them to take part, for example, when it comes to that stage, we hope and pray that they'll want to learn how to worship. The more you can help them to come up with ideas for how they might, you know, how they might do blessings at the end of the service. You know, if you have a little communion, how they might exchange the peace. What would a confession look like for them? Because there are lots of different ways of doing confession. You can drop the stones in the pool, as Grace was describing. You have written confessions, you can sing confession, you can write poems that are confessional. In some traditions, in the Methodist tradition, they used to confess their sins to each other. So you can just give those ideas to the group and then say, what would work for you? What would work for you? And then experiment. And then if something really bites, do it for a while. And then when it's becoming a bit routine and a bit boring and people are switching off in their minds, stop doing it for a while and pick up another element of worship and experiment with that. So, you know, just think of the elements of worship, particularly in a communion service, and ask, what are the ways that we can do these different elements in a manner that's authentic to us as a group, and get the group to come up with the ideas.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mike. There's some really good questions coming in, and there's Neil and Nikki and Tim both sort of raised similar things about, so this sounds okay when we have started a group, then it's a group that gathers around us, but sometimes we need to join in with what is already happening, perhaps in the community. It may not be our group or our community that we're part of, but is it possible to use the resource in that context, do you think?
Simon, I think that's a really great question. And I'm thinking of some folks that I'm talking to in my church and where I worship. And they're thinking of joining a community centre and taking part in some of the sports activities there. And so the sort of conversations we're having, I don't know if this will actually take place, but the sort of things we're exploring in conversation is whether they might go in, join in the sporting activities, be part of the group, and then look for ways that they can serve in that context. It might be that they say, tell you what, we'll provide some food, so at the end of our sporting activities, we can eat together. And so you become, you as it were, become servants of that group, and maybe around the loving activity that you bring into that group, maybe eating together, a little community forms, and in that community, you can then do the sort of thing that we're describing in this resource. Now, it may not work like that. It may not work like that for you. It may not work for these 2 or 3 people that are talking about their involvement in the community group. They might get involved in the community centre. They might find it's inappropriate to have food and so on. It just doesn't work. They can't see an opening. So they just go in. They're just themselves. They love the people around them. And probably the evangelism, if it occurs, is going to be more one-to-one in a more traditional way. And that's great and that's fine. And if the evangelism doesn't occur because God doesn't open the doors, that's fine as well. We just don't have to get stressed out about this.
Great. The questions keep coming in, Mike, so, and we've got a bit of time. So there's one here about safeguarding and accountability. And I guess this is in some ways a sort of a broader Fresh Expressions question, which is fine. But you know, what do we do about those very practical things of safeguarding and accountability when perhaps we're involved in starting a fresh expression of church?
Yeah,
might
really.
emerge out of this. Yeah,
really, really important. We you know, we're not even on the starting line unless we're providing safe spaces for people. So if you're working with vulnerable adults, and if you're working with children or teenagers, and you're starting one of these Christian communities, then you need to talk to your safeguarding officer. If you're in an Anglican church, there'll be a safeguarding officer in every parish. There'll be one in your diocese. If you're in a denomination that's not Anglican, they will have safeguarding officers. I can promise you. You need to go and find out who they are and ask them what you should do. Get hold of the policy. There'll be a written policy somewhere. You need to go through that with your team and make sure you're doing it.
Yeah, and it's worth saying that that Fresh Expressions is supportive of a mixed ecology where they inherited alongside the new ways of doing things. And I think there is it's always helpful when that relationship is there. And actually, you know, you talk elsewhere, Mike, about are we really church if we're not in relationship with the wider church in what we're doing? There's perhaps a more theological question than practical question here from Rob, who how does a resource like this fit when we are, as pioneers, looking to see what God is doing in the community and join in with that, transferring power to other people, to the community in which we are living incarnationally, you know, seeing where God is working and joining in. Can this resource be used, you know, and not, yeah, does it align with that type of approach to pioneering, which is important to a lot of pioneers?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, this phrase, see what God is doing and joining in, sometimes it can be maddeningly general. What does it mean in practice? So let me give you an example. Someone was telling me they were from Derby, and they had a group that cleared graffiti from the neighborhood and tried to improve the environment. And they would come together, a group of men, and after they'd done their physical work, they'd meet in a pub for a drink and they'd have conversations. Now, they themed their conversations in this way. In Derby, Toyota is one of the biggest employers, and the Toyota factory has the mantra, constant improvement. So they said to one another, when we meet together, let's talk about how we can constantly improve as fathers, as friends, as partners, and in the workplace and so on. How can we constantly improve in the environmental work that we're doing in all the different parts of our lives? How can we constantly improve? Now, what was going on there in my view, was that the Holy Spirit was already at work in a funny sort of way in that Toyota factory, because constant improvement is not a million miles away from what God is calling us to do. And what they were doing was seeing how there's an opportunity there, and joining in the Holy Spirit was spotting the opportunity that the Holy Spirit was creating by being at work in the world and in a factory where they had the principle of trying to do what they did better and better and better. So that's an example of what it means to be sort of looking for the Spirit. What's the Spirit doing? How can we join in?
Yeah, that's great. There's a question from Scott, which I think is exactly what this resource is hoping to do. It says, is there an established social, if there is an established social action or community group, are there ways of moving towards an after group table talk type activity, or is that too big a first step?
I think, I mean, I was in a conversation with someone in the last 1 or 2 days where they were talking about a group that are just restarting after lockdown, and they were going to start a new sort of social activity. And they were talking straight away about what sort of event they could put alongside it, like that quarter of an hour spiritual activity alongside it, as something that people might want to come to. So, you know, come to our social event, whatever activity it is, we're going to do this and this for the first hour or a couple of hours, whether it's a book group or a film club, that you go and discuss what you watched, you know, perhaps watch a film one week and then discuss it the following week over a meal. Whatever it is you do, come and join us with that. And by the way, if you want to stay behind for 15 minutes of headspace, we're going to just have a quiet time together where we can encounter God, if we believe in God, or just to have some positive thoughts for one another in the group. If you'd like to just have that oasis of tranquility and peace, come and join us. So, you know, you can put it alongside many activities. I'm not saying you do it with every activity, and this is partly what we mean by discerning what the Spirit is doing. You know, can you imagine in your minds, as the 2 or 3 of you are thinking about this, can you imagine how people would respond in that group? Would they respond positively? Would they feel it's an intrusion? Would they be wanting to rush off quickly because they got to get home? You know, what are all the things that might stop them, or what are all the things that might encourage them and might make them want to welcome this sort of activity? So just as you imagine people's reactions, so that can be a vehicle for the Spirit to confirm that you should be doing this, or perhaps put up an amber light and saying, hang on, I think you should wait a bit.
Thanks, Mike. There's a question about how this might work with the deaf, and related to that is Denise is working as a chaplain, and I think a lot of chaplaincy work is sort of one-to-one. Are there ways that you think a chaplain might be able to use this resource? Or, I mean, have you, I don't know, each context is different. There's a question there about well-being spaces and similarities there as well, but I'm just wondering if you've got any sort of thoughts on those particular contexts.
I mean, if the situation is where you're doing one-to-one, then this resource is not particularly for you. You might find some interesting thoughts within it that you can adapt, but it's not specifically for one-to-one context. But and I know 1 or 2 chaplains to deaf communities where there is a community and they do come together as a community. And if that was to develop in one's work, then this might be a resource that you could adapt to that context.
Brilliant, yeah. And I think so just the renew well-being question is how is this different to that? I know the renew well-being set up relatively well, and I think those spaces are created with a prayer space within, and so in some ways, you know, it's integral to that. There is some similarity, but this is about perhaps adding the spiritual dimension to something that already exists, in a way that, you know, renew well-beings have those spaces integrated from the beginning. Just one last question, I think, probably the last question before we just draw this conversation to a close. There's a question about how this relates to greenhouse, and I think when we talk about greenhouse, some may not know what that is, and that's a particular Anglican project that perhaps you could explain, Mike, because I know you're quite involved in that. But also, greenhouse uses a godsend material. So, just in terms of the relationship between this and greenhouse and godsend.
So let me just backtrack a bit and to add a comment to what Simon said in response to that last question. It might well be that you do start an activity, a community with a prayer space built in. That's great, but you might find that this resource, one or two of the topics within it, can help you take a next step. You've got a group and you're beginning to pray together. Well, what do we do next? And you might find that Bible talk in the discussion topic is a helpful thing for you. Or you might find some of the ideas in the seventh topic for introducing worship. You might find that if you read the guide, you might find there are a number of ideas there. One or two of them might be relevant and help you take another step. So just see this resource as something that you can just plunder. You're already doing some praying with people. That's brilliant. What do we do next? Have a look and see whether there are some topics there that can help you answer that question. In terms of the relationship to Greenhouse and Godsend and so on, Godsend is an app, by the way, that you can download, FX Godsend. It's free, or you can go on to the FX resourcing website and you can get a website version of it. And that helps teams travel through that loving first cycle that Simon put up at the beginning. So if you're at the beginning stage and you want ideas for how you might listen or what might be practical forms of organized love or how to build community, then that's a resource that you can use. Some of the material in this Sharing Jesus resource is in that app in Godsend. It's there under the heading of Sharing Jesus and in the section on church. But there's quite a lot in this Sharing Jesus resource that we're talking about this evening. There's quite a lot that's not in the app. And so you can see this as a sort of a complementary material or additional material. The Godsend material is used as part of Greenhouse, and so you could use this resource Sharing Jesus as part of Greenhouse too. I'm not going to go into a long explanation of what Greenhouse is. This is just a little sort of private Anglican conversation we're having here, so I'm going to quickly stop before the rest of you slit my throat.
I don't think we'd ever do that, Mike, but it's great. And so I'm going to, you talked about Godsend. I'm going to do a couple of adverts now, but the first of these adverts is for a workshop. So again, indicated at the bottom of the front page of the website is the ability to join a mailing list. And we want to those that are interested in using the Sharing Jesus resource and begin using the Sharing Jesus resource, we want to get your feedback. We want to be able to talk to one another about how that's going and engage with you, and for you to come and dig deeper. And so we've got our first workshop on the 8th of November at 7:30. We'll be sending out information to the mailing list about that. So do sign up if you're, I think Lizzie might mention the mailing list later, but you can sign up for the mailing list on the Sharing Jesus resource or elsewhere. But Mike, do you want to say anything about that workshop?
No, come, share experiences. If you've got practical questions, it is a workshop. So it's for folks who are looking for practical answers. Perhaps they've got practical problems, and others, the wisdom will be in the room, and so we'll hopefully be able to help each other and support one another and learn from each other. Brilliant.
And there's the website again. Yeah, join the mailing list, as I pointed out. Some other adverts. So we've talked about the Godsend resource. There's another book that Mike was involved in writing with a practitioner called Mike Beck, called The 21st Century Christian Following Jesus Where Life Happens. That's available from our shop. And that's a really good practical story of a church that's taken some of these principles and started a number of fresh expressions in every nook and cranny of life. And so that's a good read. And there's the Godsend app. So do look for FX Godsend in the App Store or Google Play. It's an interactive, there's the loving first or listening first or the fresh expressions journey, however you want to describe that journey. It's there and you can interact with it and yeah, dig deep at whichever part of the journey you're at. And there's also a book available. We've recently put the Godsend materials into book format, and generally that we do have a few copies available on the FX resourcing shop, but if you go onto Amazon, this is available there, and you can also download it for Kindle. I think that is us. I'm gonna Mike, just thank you again for the resource, for your thinking on this, and the ability to be able to observe and listen to practitioners and have put this together. We appreciate that and trust that this is going to be of service to the church and to all sorts of disciples seeking to share Jesus in their everyday lives. So bless you for your contribution in this way.
Well, thank you to you, Lizzie and Simon, for hosting this evening, and also to Fresh Expressions, who, along with Salvation Army, have really made this whole resource possible. It wouldn't have happened without either of you. But special thanks to everyone who's come along and been with us this evening.
Bless you. Over to you, Lizzie.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Simon and Mike, for all that you shared. It's been great to just expand our imaginations and think about how we can bring Jesus into everyday conversations. Just as you guys were talking, like it made me think of a story that I don't know, I feel like I'm being prompted to share, and I hope it encourages someone. But when I was growing up, I always wanted to be an evangelist. I was the evangelism secretary at university and stuff like that. And actually, when I got married, because the Fresh Expression I'd started with my fiance, then husband, failed. We were bankrupt. We had nowhere to live. The vicar put evangelist as my job description because I had no job title. And I always hoped one day I would live up to that job title. And I thought, I used to get very anxious about telling people about Jesus because I thought I needed to know all the answers, that I needed to have a really great Bible knowledge, that I would be able to defend God in debates and conversation. And to be honest, the experience in my life that has turned me into an evangelist has actually been the loss of 6 children. Because it was through battling in my faith and working through that kind of grief and working out if I still believed in God that I realized that actually there was nothing else on this world that helped me make sense of my story and who I was. And it was that turned me into an evangelist. So it wasn't about having the answers, because I still don't know the answers to so many things that happen in this world. But there is nothing like the Christian faith that's helped me make sense of the story that I'm living in and the person that I am. And that just set me free to just be myself around other people. And so what we're talking about here it's not about knowing all the answers. It's not about knowing the Greek or the Hebrew. It's about kind of sharing how faith has made sense in our lives, how it's helped us make sense of who we are. And I've had the most remarkable conversations, like walking in the park or on the beach when someone, like with the dog, and and someone says like maybe they've lost their relative or something like that, and Christianity is fantastic at dealing with grief and suffering. We worry about that question when it comes up on some kind of debate, but actually the Christian faith has so much to offer to those who grieve. And for me, it's always been an opportunity to share Jesus. Creating spaces to lament has always helped kind of point people to Jesus. And so in those kind of groups, those community groups, like it could be, if someone's lost someone, like talking and having the courage to walk into suffering with them can be the best opportunity to share Jesus with them. Not that you're taking advantage in any way, but because the Christian faith genuinely has so much to offer people that this world just can't offer. So being encouraged, it's just kind of learning with God, just being changed by him, and having, I don't know, I've lost the words now, but God has helped me make sense of life, and I'm sure that's why you're here tonight, is because he's changed you and he's helped you make sense of who you are in the story you're living. And that's what people need to hear. It's not about answers. In the video, it was saying, open the Bible does the evangelism for you. We've done Discovery Bible Studies, which is kind of what Mike was talking about, and it's on the website, and it's part of the Sharing Jesus resource. When you open scripture and you just say, you just ask questions about what people can see and what does that speak into your life about. And we've had the most amazing discussions, and it might not be with people with faith. It's not, God doesn't need defending. He just needs you to open up the space to let him in and let him do the work. So really hope that tonight would just kind of help you on that journey and inspire you, and maybe kind of fan that little spark into flame. And we're here to walk with you in that and to encourage you along the way and to share stories. And if you have any stories you'd love to share, do get in touch, because we'd love to hear them and kind of share them on our social media and our website. And so just to finish, I'm just going to put up some links of different things if you want to connect in any way. So for you guys tonight, you are so lucky, so blessed. You can get a sneak peek of the new Fresh Expressions website if you go on the link now. So you're very special because no one else has seen this. Also, we have the YouTube channel is up there. So we've done a lot of online conversations with Fresh Expressions practitioners, with theologians, writers, all about different aspects of pioneering, of mission, in all different manner of contexts, some online experiences, some in person. And if you go on our YouTube channel, it's a great resource to hear stories of what other people are doing and how God's using them in those places. If you want to stay connected, do sign up for our newsletter. It's okay. And okay, so Salvation Army know about the website as well. It's okay, Andrea, I forgive you. The MailChimp, we've got a link there to sign up for our newsletter. It's the best way to find out about new resources. Which similar, we've got the Sharing Jesus kind of webinar session coming up. There will be more events like that. For example, that we have a Who Me event where we kind of give you a bit of an overview about Fresh Expressions and help you discern what God might be calling you to do in your context. There'll be more of those events coming up. And also, if you want to find out more about how you can support Fresh Expressions financially, then there's a link there where you can find out a bit more about that. And Simon's there, got the Sharing Jesus website, which obviously would be great to share with you because that's why you're here, and the FX resourcing website. So thank you so much for coming. What I'm going to do is, before we go, is we're gonna pray, and I'm gonna share the Fresh Expressions prayer, which was a prayer written by one of our Fresh Expressions leadership community members. And so I'm just going to see if I can share screen. So I've put the words up so you can see the words as well, so you know what you're praying. But I'm just going to pray this over us as we close. So yeah, gracious God, keep us ever mindful of your presence, thankful for what has been and excited for what is to come. May we walk in humility, always hungry for more of you. Open our ears that we would always hear you. Break our hearts for what hurts you. Holy Spirit, lead us always to where you need us to be. Equip us to be a courageous movement, telling stories of hope and proclaiming in fresh ways the good news to this generation, to the glory of our Lord and Saviour, Jesus Christ. Amen. Thank you for joining us. It has been fantastic to have you as part of this. We pray God and will use you in the context that you're in. Stay in touch, stay connected, and hopefully we will see you soon. Goodbye. I'll just do this is the Zoom wave.